One item that's commonly overlooked when purchasing or riding an old motorcycle is the condition of its charging system. While issues on two-wheeled machines that do not have or require a battery are typically apparent immediately, these problems on 6 and 12-volt machines with a dedicated battery are not usually as apparent at first, at least not without a bit of testing. While the bike may seem to run fine upon startup, a charging system that is not performing properly will manifest itself later on in the form of slower turn signals, fainter horn, dimming headlights, diminishing or erratic engine performance, and ultimately, in many cases, a non-running bike incapable of jumping energy across the spark plug's gap, leaving its rider frustrated and stranded. While there are several possible causes to a lack of performance in an old motorcycle's charging system, let's take a look at a common one. In a bike that seemed to have a borderline charging system while we were riding it, a 1964 Honda C200 Baby Dream 90. So riding the C200 the other day, it seemed that the battery wasn't charging sufficiently. I thought that maybe the battery was suspect, so I went ahead and swapped it out with a newer dry cell one. That really didn't seem to solve the problem, especially when you're using the lights. I know these old 6-volt Hondas aren't known for being stellar at charging the battery up, but it doesn't really seem to be maintaining it as it should. I'm going to go ahead and do some exploration. Let's see if we can't figure out what's going on here. We'll go ahead and get down here and pull the side cover off. Take that. All right. I'll go ahead and switch my meter to DC volts. And as you can see there, we're at 6.35 volts. That's with the bike off. I'll go ahead and turn the ignition on. It didn't drop yet, but I'm betting it will when the points close. So I'll go ahead and turn the motor just a bit. And there we go. Points closed, so now we're at 6 volts. If I turn the light on, that drains it down 5.8 volts. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and start this thing up. We'll see what it does when it's running. So we'll go ahead and fire this machine up, see what happens. Yeah, turns out it helps when you have the key on. With the bike running to 6.21 volts, so idling, you know, that has a slight drain. It's not really charging the battery idling. Let's give it some gas and see what it does. So it gets about 6.35 when I'm holding the gas on it. But what that's telling me, if we're riding it, it's not maintaining the charge at idle and it's dropping it down. I've turned the headlight on. Now it dropped it at idle down to 6.05. Let's see what happens if I've got the lights on and I'm riding it. The charging system seems to be somewhat working, but similar to a lot of these old bikes, it's not exactly ideal, right? Because what that's telling me is that with the bike idling with the lights on, it's not really charging the battery up, and I'm not even sure if it's maintaining it. It's definitely on the fritz. So we'll go ahead and shut that off. And now you can see when I turn it off, the voltage is back up to 6.25. So it's not really charging it to maintain charge when the light is on. So that's got a slight drain as I expected. That battery had been fully charged, so it would take a while for it to drain down riding it, but eventually I'd suspect that it would probably drain this battery down. I have a suspicion a pretty common component on these is the selenium rectifier. That bolt there is what holds it. It's right behind there on this one. It's up underneath the frame, so I'm going to have to pull the battery out and take that out. Luckily, my stash of old CT90 parts, which would be the same 6-volt system, I was lucky enough to find and never fitted it to the machine. So why don't we go ahead and try this out? These are available on eBay. They're roughly about 20 to 25 bucks and should plug into the stock wiring harness. They look a little different. They work much better typically. And you can find the actual rectifier regulator part on Amazon. It's a pretty standard part, not specific to Honda. It's just a general electronic component. And I looked on there and you can find these metal shrouded ones for around $11. So if you had the stuff and you wanted to make your own harness, you could be in it for 11 bucks. But for just buying one of them, I don't mind spending 20 bucks on eBay either. Not a bad deal. So let's go ahead and swap this out and see what readings we get. See if we can get an improvement. Pull my HydroTurf shim out. These things typically should come off pretty easy. Not sure how easy it'll be to fish the regulator out, fish the new one in, but we'll find out. And these 6-volt batteries, these are pretty standard. You can actually find them. They're used in emergency lights, somewhere 11 to 13 bucks at Menards. And I think Tractor Supply actually has them for between $6 and $8. I'm going to unplug that. Okay, get that out of there. I've got my little pad in the back to hold it. It works out just fine. So hopefully it's not too hard to fish out and disconnect. I'm hoping there's enough wires on that regulator that I can, once I get the bolt, the nut off, I can push it back through, fish it out fairly easy, and not have to do a whole lot else. So yeah, here we go. We'll go ahead and unplug this guy. There we go. This one plugs in there, the yellow. Okay, so there we go, that's unplugged. There's the 3 wires. You can see the wires are pretty much the same, except it's got this ground wire. All right, so I went ahead and fabricated a new connector here. Should plug into this nicely. For those of you who haven't watched and who want good factory looking connections like this, similar to OEM, definitely don't use AutoZone connectors on these bullet style connections there. Watch my video on how to properly repair wire harness connections. That's a good one if you haven't seen it. This end has managed to, they managed to make that different, so I guess I'm gonna have to go ahead and redo that one as well. Looking at this, when you look into it a little bit, the CT90, which these guys are commonly, that's the more common application for these, they've got all 3 male ends on it, where this has female ends, so I went ahead and swapped that connector. So now let's go ahead, hook it up, and hopefully we'll have no more snags, hopefully. There's that, there it is. The red goes into the red and white one there. So we'll go ahead and clip that in. And now I think this is ready to go ahead and tuck back in there and mount up to the frame. Let's see if we can actually find that hole. Oh, for goodness sakes. Of course. That's got a flat there. But there she is. All right, now she's fed through. All right, good. Now that's hooked up. Let's go ahead and we'll mount both those ground cables to that. All right, that's tightened up. Now let's go ahead and hook that positive terminal back up. Now let's see if I can get my baseline reading. 6.34 volts, okay. Drops it to 6.09 when the key's on. Let's go ahead and start it up, see what happens. Oh yes, certainly do. So there we go. All we've changed out is that regulator, and that's great. Now we are charging the battery at idle. Of course, that's no headlights yet, but that's at idle. Give it the gas. We're at 8 volts, that's perfect. That is wonderful. We turn the lights on, it's at 6.5 volts idling, right? So it doesn't even seem to care if the light's on or if it's off necessarily. It keeps the battery voltage right around 6.5 volts when it's idling. Drops it a little bit, but not by much. You shut it off and you can see it drops it, but it actually charged the battery up a little bit, and that's fantastic. Noted improvement with the new aftermarket regulator. That's night and day difference. Now that that's all buttoned up, I'll push my terminals back on, make sure they're secure. That's in the clip, fuse is clipped in there, and I'll go ahead and slide my cover on. There's a little envelope, a little notch in the frame there. You start by getting the lip in that, and then sliding that in, and then kind of rocking it inward, finding your bolt hole, tightening it back up. Just get it finger tight. And there we go. We're put back together. I'll go ahead and take this thing out, take it for a spin, and see how it does. Should be a noted improvement. The purpose of the regulator in a charging system is to convert the AC voltage produced from the engine stator assembly into DC voltage. In the 1960s through early 1970s, the rectifiers manufactured using selenium as the material to pass voltage through in one direction were the primary form available and were therefore used by many motorcycle manufacturers. However, while these simple rectifiers worked fine in the years these electrical systems were produced, they were not without issues and are known to degrade over time, even sitting on the shelf without use. The newer semiconductor-controlled silicon diode rectifiers that replace the older selenium versions are not only more reliable, but also have a lower resistance to them, which leads to an increase in charging voltage as well, and in turn, better performing electronics on these older two-wheeled machines. Easy fix, easy upgrade, happier riders.